What's up, people of the internet? My name is Dabakev, and today we have a bunch of new cards to go over, so stay tuned. Alright, so we got a bunch of new cards from the Artifaction GG podcast that was recently revealed, and we're going to go over them today. And I'm super excited and happy for Artifaction GG. Like, good for them. I'm really glad because they put out great content that they were able to get, you know, these card reveals. That being said, hey, Valve employees, if there's any Valve employees out there, I would love to do a card reveal. Just one. Could you give me one card reveal? I would love it. My fans would love it. Please throw me a card. Anyways, let's dive into the cards. Okay, so first off, we have the red hero Timbersaw. We've seen his stats and his passive before. He is a 4/11 with reactive armor. Timbersaw has +1 armor for each of his attackers, meaning at max he's going to get 3 armor, meaning the person across from him and the 2 people diagonal from him are all targeting him. But that's kind of a rare scenario, so more likely it'll just be +1 attack. But we have just now learned his premier card, Whirling Death. A 2-cost red spell. Choose an allied red hero, deal 2 damage to its enemy neighbors, and give them -2 attack this round. So basically in a cone in front of Timbersaw or any other red hero, you're dealing 2 damage and giving them -2 attack. So a decent mix of offense and defense. So Timbersaw's stats, a little bit unique as far as red heroes goes, because usually you have kind of like a meteor body on Timbersaw, but he's got the magic number 4 attack, which is just enough to kill melee creep. So maybe you don't need too much stats beyond that. And of course he seems a little bit weaker than he really is because his armor value isn't visible, and he's going to be getting more than likely at least 1 armor, possibly more, from depending on how the arrows fall. And his Whirling Death is sort of like almost like a cleave effect, just sort of hits everyone in front of him. So I think Timbersaw is meant to be more as like a board clearing option. He's sort of like a cleave parallel option if you don't want to go, you know, with Spin, who's all about cleaving. If you just want to sort of do more spell-based damage, he's sort of viable. But the problem with Timbersaw is just, I feel like his body's a bit lackluster. Sure, he's got tons of health, but you know, normally when you play red, you expect to kind of smack into things with a bit more potency. And so I'm wondering maybe he won't be quite as useful as other more powerful red options. The second revealed hero is Ogre Magic. We've already seen his body. Once again, he's a 3/7, and after you play a blue spell, there's a 25% chance to create a base copy of that spell and add it to your hand. But we have learned his premier card, Ignite, is a 3-cost blue improvement. Deal 1 piercing damage to each enemy before the action phase. I'd like to point out that during the leak, I accurately predicted that this was his card. I assumed that it was deal 1 piercing damage because in the leak we just saw like the first word, like deal in each, and we saw that it was a 3-cost improvement. So I was like, I bet it's deal 1 piercing damage, and I was correct. So basically this is a half power conflagration, but it also pierces. So I think honestly this has the potential to be a pretty strong card because you can play it on turn 1. It allows you to basically trade with melee creeps. So if you play it downstream, like if you're in lane 1 and you play it on lane 2, then when you move to lane 2, it pings for 1, then your melee creeps will attack for 2, and then next turn it will ping for another 1, which is 4, the magic number, and it will kill off the melee creeps, allowing melee creeps to always win trades against other melee creeps in that lane, which is pretty handy. So I think just being able to get an improvement out on turn 1 that's going to constantly be dealing damage over and over and over is pretty handy. Plus, there's a 25% chance that when you play Ignite, you're going to get a duplicate of it in your hand. So there's a fairly good possibility that you can have multiple Ignites in, well, I don't say every lane. That's kind of high rolly. It's not very likely that you're going to get more than 1 of these. But guaranteed pierce damage is pretty solid. I mean, 1 damage isn't a lot. You're not going to get a whole lot of value out of this. I guess the way to think of it is, over the course of a game, you're probably going to get more than likely, let's say 4 to 7 total damage against each unit in the lane, which is, you know, respectable. It's just the games typically don't last that long. So if you play it on turn 3 and the match is over by, let's say, I don't say turn 3, on mana 3, and the match is over by mana 9, that means you've gotten 6 ticks off of it, which is not too bad. So overall, I like this card a lot. It gives blues some really cool presence early game. It allows you to wipe the board and soften things up to make them a little bit weaker for your conflags, your thunderstorms, though it's got kind of some anti-synergy with Annihilation, right? If you've got Annihilation, which wipes everything regardless of how much health they have, then do you really need Ignite? you know, it kind of doesn't matter at that point. Though I guess the idea is you put Ignite in lanes that you want to win, so you can soften up the front line, and then in the lanes that you're losing, you just plop down a blue hero, run Annihilation, and then just blow up the whole board, and suddenly you're not really losing that lane anymore. No one's winning it. So for that reason, I think Ogre Magi will have a place in some decks. Plus, I mean, multicast is just super, super cool. If you're running a combo deck, just having the possibility of getting another Annihilation off of your Annihilation, another Thunderstorm off of your Thunderstorm is fantastic. So I like Ogre Magi. I can't wait to play him. I will probably base an entire deck around him because he seems super fun. Next up is Soul of Spring, a 4-cost green spell. Modify a hero with, after you play a green card, give this hero and its allied neighbors +4 regeneration this round. So essentially this is a fantastic buffing card, especially if you play sort of cheaper options allowing you to chain gun out a couple of green spells. Stars Align comes to mind because you Stars Align, and then play a big green spell, and suddenly that's 3 greens cards, and then that's +12 regeneration on the hero and its 2 neighbors, meaning in combat that basically translates into +12 block. If they don't get damaged, that turns into +12 healing. So that's a phenomenal amount of healing, a phenomenal amount of board presence. Green is so good at keeping units alive, keeping their board strong so that their board gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this card will be a pretty effective way of doing that. The issue with cards like these cards that trigger when you play another card, is sometimes you just don't have a green card to play. You know what I mean? Which means you've modified a unit, you've spent mana and a card on this effect, and you don't have any way to trigger it. If you compare it to something like Heartstopper Aura triggers every single turn, regardless, as long as you have that hero on the board. But Soul of Spring requires you to have cards in hand to invest to get the trigger. So I feel like for that reason it's kind of limited a bit. But that being said, this is one of the highest healing cards that we've seen so far. I think it might actually be the highest unit healing card that we've ever seen, because you can just play 2 or 3 cards and that's 8 or 12 healing, which is nuts. It's so much healing. You can very easily restore a hero, like a green hero, and then a adjacent hero and a creep to full health effortlessly with this card. Next up is Call the Reserves, a 6-mana blue spell. Summon 2 melee creeps into any lane. So essentially this is better late than never, except twice as effective and twice as expensive. So being able to put presence in different lanes is pretty nice. That being said, this is really expensive for what it gives you. I mean, melee creeps aren't that strong. They give you blockers for sure, but the fact that you have to invest 6 mana in it, and the fact that you can't choose where those melee creeps spawn kind of sucks. You know, if you've got a Thunderhide Alpha ready to destroy your tower and you play Call the Reserves, you have to hope that the melee creeps are going to fall in front of that Thunderhide Alpha, because they might not. So other than that, this falls really well into Blue's ability to summon creep. They've got Prelix has Barracks, they've got Better Late Than Never, they've got Dimensional Portal. So it's cool that Blue summons lots and lots of melee creeps on the board. I just wish that there were more cards that trigger other effects off of melee creeps. I think the only other options we know of right now are Altar of the Mad Moon and that red card, what's it called? Ogre Corpse Tosser is its name. Basically it allows melee creep to deal direct damage to the enemy tower. So at the moment I just feel like there isn't enough creep support to really make a melee creep based deck. I hope that there are more supporting cards in the future, because I'd really like to try a blue plus another color like green or red that's all about making lots of melee creep and then getting some other value out of them, like they deal extra damage or they heal or whatever. And at the moment, until that happens, I don't think Call the Reserves and Dimensional Portal and, well, I mean, just Dimensional Portal is pretty good, but I just don't think that all the melee creep cards together are going to create a deck archetype until we get enough supporting cards to make them viable. Next up is the Clashream Hourglass. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. For 10 gold, equipped hero has +4 health. Whenever an opponent draws a card, give that card +1 lock if equipped hero is in any lane. So essentially what that means is just whenever you draw a card, you can't play it that turn. So those 2 cards that you get off the top of the deck at the start of your turn, can't play them that turn. Any other cards you draw throughout the game can't be played on that turn either. So not too bad. I mean, locking down 2 cards is nice. I wonder if it triggers off of items. Do you draw items from the item deck, or are they acquired through other means? Because if you can actually lock down the 2 starting draws plus any card draw plus any items you acquire from your item deck, that's actually not too bad. The issue is it's real expensive. 10 gold for just 4 health is not very meaningful. Though I could see maybe this card being popular in like a lock-based deck that's all about shutting down your opponent's hand. I don't know if this is good, but I will say it's a super cool effect. I like this card. It does a very interesting thing, and I really want to try it out. Though my guess is it's going to be a little bit too expensive to be viable, but man, it's super cool. Next up, Curse of Atrophy. This is a 6-cost green spell. Modify enemy heroes with -2 attack. Now, I don't think this card is very strong. It's just really, really expensive, and the effect isn't that great. Modify heroes with -2 attack, it's okay. I mean, on a lot of heroes, they're just going to be in a situation where that -2 attack isn't going to make any difference. Curse of Atrophy, you're just not going to get a whole lot of value out of it. You know, I mean, best case scenario, you're going to cast this on 3 heroes, possibly 4 or 5, but that's super, super rare. So really, you're just looking at -2 attack on 1 or probably 2 heroes, which is not that much. I just don't think you're going to get much value out of it. It's also super easy to counter. You just play weapons on those heroes. It's like, okay, -2 attack, no big deal. I have +5 attack from a weapon, and I've got 6 attack by default, so it just doesn't make any difference. So I don't think this card is going to be popular. It's just too expensive. It's too hard to hit multiple heroes with it. So I don't think we're going to see this card very much at all, to be honest with you. Next up, Rampaging Hellbear, 4-cost green creep. He's a 2/3. Modify Rampaging Hellbear with +4 attack after the combat phase. That is a massive amount of attack. We can compare this to the Satyr Duelist. The Satyr Duelist has a better body, but he scales slower. Rampaging Hellbear has just enough health to survive 1 melee creep hit, and anything more than that, he's going down, but the +4 attack means he is going to just scale insanely quickly. Of course, the Satyr Duelist has enough attack to survive a bunch of heroes. Most blue heroes can't kill him. I think no blue heroes can kill him. Most green heroes can't kill him because most green heroes have 4 attack, but red and black heroes can somewhat reliably take out the Satyr Duelist. So essentially, this is just a much more offensive version of Satyr Duelist. And to be honest, I think Satyr Duelist is probably going to win out over the Rampaging Hellbear, because once you have a card out that starts growing bigger and bigger and bigger, you just want it to stay on the board. It doesn't really matter if it's a 15 attack or a 10 attack. The point is, it's a huge creep that's grown really big, and you want it to survive. And while Rampaging Hellbear does grow much faster than the Satyr Duelist, the issue is it's also much easier to kill. So for that reason, I think we're probably not going to see Rampaging Hellbears when Satyr Duelists are available, but who knows, I could be surprised. Next up is Assassin Shadow, a 7-cost creep, 15 attack and 5 health. She has Siege 5, and Assassin Shadow has -2 attack for each ally. So let's imagine we've got a melee creep. Let's even say 2 melee creeps. That's 2. Then we got a hero, that's 3. 3 times 2 is 6. That's -6 attack, which is a fairly likely board state, which turns him into a 9/5 for 7 mana. Of course, it could be much higher than that, but overall, this is sort of a glass cannon. I mean, she's going to be hitting hard, kind of no matter what you do. You kind of have to, like, the thing about this card is it's got a weakness, like a built-in weakness, where the wider your board, the weaker she is, but you get to control your deck. You know, you get to decide if you build a very wide deck, and if you build a wide deck, just don't put this card in, you know. But if you've got a deck that's just about having 5 heroes and then a bunch of spells and improvements, and you don't have a lot of creep, then obviously Assassin Shadow is going to be a go-to, because you're going to be looking at, you know, 1 or 2 heroes in the lane max, and you're not going to get too much of a minus attack. The issue with Assassin Shadow is she's just really vulnerable. 5 health is just kind of measly. She's super vulnerable. It's pretty likely that she's going to die you know, the turn she comes out because someone's going to put something in front of her, like a hero or a unit, she's going to go down. But she's pretty much going to be taking out whatever is in front of her. And even if she doesn't, she's got the +5 siege, meaning she's going to be doing damage. So she's kind of like a finisher card. You can really smack the tower for really, really high damage. And the thing I like about her is it's really easy to build around her weakness. Super easy to build around her weakness. You can have a low creep count deck very easily with Black. Black likes improvements. They like buffing heroes, so it wouldn't be hard to do. It's not like, you know, this were in green, it'd be a different story. But no, this is in Black. Black can get away with with a very narrow board very easily. So for that reason, it's got potential. Speaking of Black creep, we have a Horde Catapult at 2 mana. It's a 0/4, deal 2 piercing damage to the enemy tower before the action phase. So honestly, not a bad option. It's a blocker, and having a blocker is fantastic because blockers are just really, really important in Artifact. Trust me, you need them to block heroes, you need them to block massive, you know, like the Assassin Shadow, for example. There's just tons of very, very powerful, very, very high attack units. So having just a measly little body that you can plop down and just take 1 hit and block 15 damage is very valuable. And the cool thing about this card is that you're going to be getting value out of it every single turn. The issue is you're not going to get any value out of it the turn you cast it, because you're going to have to wait until the next turn when you get into the action phase before you get any sort of value out of it. So, you know, getting 2 damage in is not too bad. So it's sort of like Trebuchet with a built-in body. Trebuchet is going to trigger every single turn, and it's going to be very hard to get rid of, but it's not going to block anything. So if you feel like your Black aggro deck that's trying to get as much tower damage in as possible needs a bit more of a defensive option, needs to be able to block hits and survive in order to be able to take out that enemy tower, then Horde Catapult might be a better option than Trebuchet. Next up, Stonehall Elite, a 4-cost red creep. He has 4 attack, 2 armor, and 2 health. Modify Stonehall Elite with +2 attack and +2 health after a unit blocking it dies. So essentially this is Bronze Legionnaire, except it's 2 mana more expensive, and it gets the +2 attack and +2 health every single time it kills something. So both of these cards right off the bat are phenomenal creep killers because they have just enough attack to kill creeps and just enough armor to not take any damage. The best way to play this card is to put a Stonehall Elite down in front of a melee creep, you know, when there's an empty slot in front of it, meaning right off the bat, essentially the turn you play this, it's going to become a 6/4, which is really impressive stats for a just 4-cost card. So if you play this right, if you are able to get that first melee creep kill, and if another melee creep drops in front of it, then this can quickly snowball out of control and be damn near unkillable. Stronger than a lot of heroes, but there's a lot of ifs in there. This is going to depend on your ability to carve out a space for it. It's going to depend a little bit on the RNG with melee creeps dropping in front of it, and it's going to depend on the enemy's ability to deal 4 damage to it before that first trigger. Unlike all the green ramping cards like the Hellbear that we just saw or the Savage Wolf, this card does grow, sure, but it's not automatic. Green likes automatic growth, but this effect in red is a triggered growth. It has to do something to get that effect. So there are definitely going to be games when you play the Stonehall Elite, they play the Satyr Duelist, and the Satyr Duelist keeps getting bigger and bigger, and your Stonehall Elite is just sitting there at 4 attack because he can't kill anything. But that being said, just because his body is pretty solid and the buff is pretty decent and he kills melee creeps effortlessly, there's a chance we could see him in red decks for sure. And finally, we have Self Sabotage, a 4-cost blue spell. Modify 2 random cards in opponent's hand with deal 6 damage to a random allied tower in any lane. So essentially, this adds an effect to the enemy's card so that when they play it, they also take 6 damage to one of their towers. This is a really amazing card, not in terms of power, but in terms of just how neat it is. Being able to modify your opponent's hand is fantastic. I mean, just it's such original design space. It's something you can basically only do in a digital card game. Playing this in real life would be a monster to keep track of. But like, this is sort of the opposite of lock. First of all, you don't want a card to be locked and to be self-sabotage, because with self-sabotage, you kind of want them to play it so that they get the penalty. So if they can't play it, then there's no point in sabotaging it. So you don't want these 2 effects to overlap. That being said, it's really, really cool that blue basically interferes with the opponent's hand. If we compare it to Magic the Gathering, and even Hearthstone, to a much lesser degree Hearthstone, the black color has a lot of card discard. So they basically, you got your hand, they just pull cards out of it and they go away. And that kind of is not fun, because your cards are fun. You want to be able to play with them. You want to be able to play the deck that you've made, and when they're just gone before you even get a chance to put them on the board, that kind of sucks. So this is sort of like a more advanced version of interfering with the enemy's hand. It doesn't remove the cards from their hand entirely. It just says, sure, you can play it, but it's gonna sting. That being said, I just don't feel like the effect is super powerful. 6 damage, a total of 12 damage. The issue is there's just a lot of times when it's going to hit the tower that you don't want it to hit, especially after the opponent has lost one of their towers and they're sitting at 80 health in their core. Then they can easily tank that damage. A 33% chance that the Thunderbolt's going to go there, and they just don't care. But sometimes they're going to just have to roll the dice, and you're going to get the damage exactly where you want. And when that happens, 4 mana for 12 total damage to the tower is really, really efficient. Plus, you can play sort of mind games with your opponent and interfere with their turn where they don't play the card they want to play because it's sabotage or has some other sucky effect that they don't want to mess with. So it's hard to evaluate these RNG cards. You know what I mean? Like, just sometimes they'll work out with you and sometimes they won't. But in general, I think this probably won't be very popular because as much damage as 12 is, that's a lot of damage. It's just you can't really guarantee which tower it's going to be in. And there's going to be too many situations where it hits a tower that you just don't care about. So I don't think we're going to see this. I'm not sure if we're going to see lock very much. I think you're probably better off playing a deck that reliably affects the board, that reliably gives you an advantage, or reliably takes away an opponent's disadvantage. And there's just too much of a gamble in self-sabotage. That being said, it's so cool. It's so original. And I want to build a deck around this. It's just really, really neat. All right, so that's it for the card reveals today. Once again, these came from Artifaction GG's podcast. And Valve employees, man, I'm trying to advertise your game. I'm trying to talk about Artifact, build a community. If you could throw me a card, I would really appreciate it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Dabacab out.